everybody, Aaron J. Anderson here with a video that I've been getting a lot of requests about my Olympus 45mm f1.2 Pro lens. I also own an Olympus 25mm f1.2 Pro lens, and the 45mm is my go-to lens. It's a 90mm equivalent, and as far as the f-stop or the depth of field you're going to get, it's a 2.4, basically the amount of blur you're going to get in the background for a full frame camera. If I can't get wide enough with my 45mm, then I go with my 25mm. But today what we're going to do is show you the best aperture for the photography that I do. Now, I did 2 weddings. I did maybe 4 or 5 photo shoots and some jewelry shoots with the Panasonic G9 and my Olympus Pro lenses. And when I went back and started editing all the photos, I come to the conclusion that there's a certain f-stop that I'm probably going to use the most often. Now, when you buy a lens that's like an f1.2, you probably heard that if you're going to buy a lens with a wide aperture, you're going to want to shoot at a wide aperture. Well, that's not always true, because an f1.2 is so shallow that you're going to have a little bit of issues getting everything in focus. And even on a micro four thirds camera, f1.2 is pretty shallow. But what's good about having an f1.2 is it's available when you want to get creative and you have time to nail the focus and get blurry backgrounds, or you're in a low light situation. So that's the good thing about having a wide aperture lens. Doesn't mean you have to shoot at it all the time. And every lens has a sweet spot. Most lenses stop down to an f5.6 is the sweet spot, meaning it's going to be the sharpest at f5.6. It's going to have less chromatic aberration, less distortion, less vignetting, and all those things that lenses can have. However, I do want to try to get blurry background, so shooting at an f5.6 isn't always the best deal. Now, one shot that I did, let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay, so this shot here is what kind of woke me up to not having to shoot at an f1.2 all the time, which I usually kind of do. But when going back and checking these, all this photography out, I noticed that it's not always ideal, and of course, a lot of you probably know that. Now, I never really had an f1.2 lens, or at least not very long. I played with the Rokinons, but this shot here was for a jewelry shoot. This is me in New York, and my wife was going to do the photography. So what I did was I set up the camera for her and told her to go in the, stand over there and point this way. Well, I didn't want to have it too shallow because, she's not a photographer and she might not nail focus, so I set the camera to an f5.6. And if you look at the image, of course we do have some blurry background. This is a little wider than a medium shot, and the bokeh is not bad, and you kind of want to capture it if you're in a beautiful place. And if we zoom in here, okay, you're going to see, look how sharp that is. I mean, this is the Olympus 45mm. You're not going to see this much on YouTube, but this is a remarkably sharp, And the cool thing is this eye is as sharp as that eye, and just almost my whole head is in focus. And that got me to the conclusion of seeing my other photography that I was doing, which maybe I'll show some photos here as I'm speaking, of the, f1.2 isn't always good. So basically what I did is, right before we left work the other day, I told my wife, hey, stand right there, let me take some shots at different apertures to see, what's going on here. What I basically did was, this isn't the actual size photo, so it might look a little blurrier to you, and just because they stacked up like this. But at f1.2 and all these different apertures, I actually painted where I could see where the focus is. So right in this red area, it's focus sharp from here to here, basically. So if you wanted to do this shot and have both eyes in focus, well, f1.2 is not going to work, and this is a medium shot. If I wanted to keep the rule and not have her nose break the face, and I turn her where her nose fell right about here, then this eye would be even further away from the camera, of course, and it would just you'd never have both eyes in focus. And I'll show you the originals here in a minute. But then if we go over to f1.4, we can see that the focus starts getting wider. And even at f1.4, her eye's still not quite in focus. At f1.8, both of her eyes would pretty much be in focus. So f1.8 is what I've been shooting most with, like the Olympus f1.8 or f1.7, Olympus f1.8 45 millimeter lenses. This is what I'm kind of used to. And going with the f1.2, I can see like, ooh, that's why I get a little disappointed on having some, too shallow depth of field, basically. In my opinion, f1.8 is pretty good because both eyes are in focus and the background blur is still there, as you can see. Let's go down here. f2.0, you can see that the whole face is, well, not quite. There's a little slither here. So even if we had her turn all the way, I caught her with her eyes closed. I didn't chimp to see if her eyes were open on all these, so I kind of missed the shot on that. But anyways, if we were to turn her nose all the way here, we would see that it would still have both eyes in focus at f2.0. So I think f2.0 is probably a pretty good sweet spot if you're doing a medium shot like this, or just doing photography in general. If you want to keep the whole face in focus, f2.0 would be it. f2.5, of course, even more is in focus. So whether she's looking this way or her nose all the way that way, you're going to get everything in focus. And f2.8, of course, even more so. It's like almost the whole head will be in focus. Now, if we look at just the bokeh alone, I can come right here just to get the distractions away. And you can see f1.2 to an f1.4, it's a little bit blurrier, of course. Are you willing to give up a little bit of blurriness for a lot sharper, basically? And I'm going to show you that even closer here. I just want you to see that even in f1.8, of course, these are shelves back here, and at f1.8 you can start to see the lines of the shelving. At f1.4, you could see them, but it's less distracting. And at f1.2, it's not there. And I know a lot of people says, I just want to shoot f1.2. You just got to make a decision. Do you want the blurriest background but also not have both eyes in focus, and most of the shots a little soft? Now, you might have heard people saying the Olympus lens at f1.2 you can shoot wide open because it's sharp, and it is sharper even at f1.2, even sharper than a lot of lenses out there. But stopping down to 1.4, it becomes really sharp, and yet you still got good background blur. So I would say 1.4 is a really nice spot to go, but if you want both eyes in focus, f1.8 is it. Now, if we go over here, let's go look at these photos in their absolute, what do you call it, best quality here. Now, this is the f1.2, and if we zoom in here, we can see that it starts to get blurry right about here and right about here. So really only from here to here is you can even see her eyebrow here a little blurry. So this is the only thing basically in focus in this whole shot. So and anything in that focal plane, the tips of these might be on the same focal plane, so they might be the same sharpness, but that's where you're going to get images that appear to kind of be soft. Even her nose and her lips are a little soft on f1.2. If we go to f1.4, we can see that now we've got almost all her eyebrow here sharp all the way up to right about here. So both eyes aren't in focus, but it's pretty good. The eyelash tips are in focus because they're probably on the same focal plane or really close. The tip of her nose is still out of focus. Her lips are still out of focus, but you get nice blurriness, and almost both eyes, not too bad. If we go to the f1.8, it's still, the bokeh is still, good for me. This is the billboard that we stood right next to. But if we look at f1.8, now you can see that it's focused way over here and in focus right about here. So almost the entire eye is in focus. If she was looking dead on or straight at the camera, they would be in focus. If we had her nose come all the way to the edge, then most of her eye would still be in the out of focus area. So something to think about. But f1.8 is pretty darn good, in my opinion, to use most of the time, because if you just look at this photo, most of the eye is in focus, and when someone's looking at it, it just looks like a sharp shot. And her lips are Oh yeah, pretty much in focus now as well. Tip of her nose is still a little bit out of focus. Let's go over to an f2. Now, like I said, I accidentally got her with her eyes closed. f2.0 for me is really nice just because it's sharp from over here all the way just to the very edge. And her eyelashes might be a little blurry because I'm capturing her, shutting her eye, so the shutter speed might have been a little not quick enough to capture that. But her lips are sharp, her eyes are sharp, her eyebrows are sharp, her whole face is sharp, and for me, this image just has more pop, more 3D pop, because you're having more sharpness here and less sharpness here, so you get more of a pop, whereas if only this is sharp and everything just starts blending into blurriness, you don't get that standout 3D pop that you might be looking for. f2.0 for me is really good also. I'm struggling from an f1.8 and f2.0. Now if we go to 2.5, now it's like, when I see the sharpness of this lens at f2.5 and f2.0, it's just really mind-boggling. I mean, it's sharp over here. Her whole front of her face is now sharp. Her nose, her lips, everything is good. And when you see a shot like this, it just stands out as being, wow, that's a nice sharp, sharp image. So keep that in mind when you choose your focal length. Now f2.8 is even more, of course. f5.6, like I showed you that photo of me in New York, is even sharper. But then you start, how much of the background blur do you want? f2.8 is even okay to me, but still, if I just am looking at trying to get, sharp eyes, I would say, and blurry backgrounds, I would say f2.0 would probably be as open as I want to go, because I want background blur. So if we look at that, even an f1.8, it's starting to look a little out of focus here, but you can see the background blur. So that's it, guys. Basically, let's look at these side by side. Let's see if I can. Okay, so what I basically did here is cut these down to the ones that I would use most, being at an f1.4. f1.2 is just a little too soft for me. I can never get both eyes in focus, and man, if you just accidentally focus on the nose, both eyes are out of focus. Where in f1.4, you're a little more forgiving here, but at f1.8, this to me I think is probably the sweet spot for this lens as far as having both eyes in focus and still having decent background blur. f2.0 would probably be, well, when you look at this, it's just, look at the background blur alone. Over here we can see these lines coming down, basically, right? At f1.8, you can barely see the lines. In f1.4, they're almost gone. f1.2 we know is just even softer, but maybe too soft for me. I would say the sweet spot would probably be any one of these. One more thing to mention, if you need more light, of course, you have to go to f1.2. So I shot all these in aperture priority, and I just wanted to also see where the shutter or the ISO would end up on, basically. And at f1.2 and f1.4, it didn't change. It was at, and I had my camera set up to not go slower than 1/100th of a second. And at f1.2 and f1.4 is at ISO 200 and 1/160th of a second. So it actually had light to spare where it actually had to make the shutter speed faster, which is a good thing. Once we went to f1.8, it went down to 1/100th of a second because it needed more light, but it was still at 200 ISO. Once we went at f2.0, it's not going to go slower than 1/100th of a second because I have it set up that way, but then it went to like 300 and something ISO, and then the 2.5 and f2.8, by the time it went to 2.8, it was all the way up to 500th. 500 ISO. So, choosing your aperture is very important with ISO as well. In this situation, any of these would have worked perfect, and that's why I think these are probably the sweet spot for most of what I do. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, leave some comments and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram, and I just started Flickr, so maybe I'll put these up on Flickr so you guys can see them at their full resolution that Flickr does. Anyways, guys, talk to you later. Bye-bye.